There is a great paradox in the journey of the empath. Precisely when they believe they have escaped, the real journey begins. Leaving the narcissist is not simply about blocking a phone number or walking away. It is like escaping a storm, yet still having lungs full of dust, a trembling heartbeat, and echoes in the mind that have not yet been named. Survival, if it remains only on the surface, has never been enough. Because everything that was endured, the manipulation, the shame, the swallowed rage, does not vanish with distance. It becomes invisible baggage, compelling the empath to look back within. Picture a phoenix, its wings igniting, its body reduced to ashes, only to rise again from the ruins with an even fiercer flame. That is the image of the empath after passing through the hell of the narcissist. What was burned away was not their soul, but their illusions, the belief that love means sacrifice, that kindness requires no boundaries, that their worth depends solely on living for others. All those illusions are consumed by fire, and from those ashes, a new self takes flight. Yet this journey is not some distant myth. It unfolds in the very fabric of real life. Escaping the narcissist is not only the end of a relationship, it is the beginning of an alchemical process of the soul. Nigredo, the blackening, when everything dissolves and the old self collapses, and afterward a new light, albedo, rubedo, is born. This is the journey Jung called individuation. From the ashes of masks and shadows, the human being discovers the whole self. And here the question resounds: who does the empath become after all they have endured? Not merely a survivor, not merely a wounded heart, but one who carries knowledge of the darkness, one who can stand before it without trembling. In today's video, we will walk step by step through this journey, from the roots of sensitivity in childhood to the fated encounter with the narcissist, from the dissolution in the labyrinth of shadows to the symbolic rebirth. And most importantly, we will uncover how, after everything, the empath not only becomes a stronger version of themselves, but also a mirror of truth and healing for the entire community. Part 1. The roots of sensitivity, the mirror of childhood. An empath does not become an empath by accident. That journey often begins very early, within the unbalanced atmosphere of a family. Anxious parents, unspoken conflicts, or anger that was never acknowledged. The child who grows up in that environment develops an essential survival skill, the ability to read invisible signals. With just a glance, a strange silence, or the slightest change in tone, they already know what is about to happen. This is not innate talent, but a strategy for survival. The child knows that if they can anticipate the moods of others, they will suffer less. Sensitivity, which is inherently a gift, becomes in such circumstances a soft armor to protect a tender soul. But every gift has its price. While learning to mirror others, the child begins to lose themselves. Natural and instinctive parts of the self-righteous anger, spontaneous joy, the ability to say no, are repeatedly denied or judged. And so they are stuffed into the invisible bag that Jung and Robert Bly described, a place where what is rejected by family and society is hidden away. The child gradually absorbs a false lesson. To be loved, they must hide their true self. To be accepted, they must wear a more agreeable face. Thus, the persona, the social mask, is formed. Outwardly, the child becomes the good kid, the listener, the gentle one. But inside, the shadow bag grows heavier, filled with the abandoned fragments of their being. As adults, empaths enter life with this paradox. Gentle, sensitive, easily adaptable on the surface, yet carrying within a treasure chest unopened the rejected parts, the unacknowledged shadows. And it is this very paradox that unconsciously leads them to the archetypal encounter. The narcissist, the one who reflects all that they have learned to suppress. Part 2. The archetypal encounter, when light and shadow attract each other. If childhood planted the seeds of sensitivity, the encounter with the narcissist is the moment those seeds sprout, but in soil drenched with shadow. The empath often wonders, why did I meet this person? Why can't I leave even though I know something is wrong? What seems to be a mere question of love is in fact an archetypal event when opposites within the human psyche are magnetically drawn to one another. The empath enters life with a persona of gentleness, a listener, a giver, a sacrificer. They believe they are the good one, and indeed others see them this way. But behind the mask lies a swelling shadow bag filled with repressed anger, a hunger for recognition, a terror of abandonment parts of themselves they never dared confront. On the other side, the narcissist has built their entire existence upon a dazzling persona, confident, charming, magnetic. Yet behind the glittering facade lies a void, a pit of shame, insecurity, and fear of worthlessness. It is precisely this polarity that generates such a powerful attraction. The empath sees in the narcissist a brilliance they believe they lack. The narcissist sees in the empath a softness and acceptance they can exploit to nourish their false persona. And so the game of projection begins. The narcissist cannot contain their own darkness, so they hurl it outward. The empath, accustomed since childhood to carrying the emotions of others, becomes the perfect vessel. Within such a relationship, the empath finds themselves in a hall of distorted mirrors where reality is constantly twisted. Emotions that belong to the narcissist, shame, anger, insecurity, are unloaded onto the empath, who then begins to doubt themselves. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe it really is my fault. They shoulder guilt that was never theirs, swallow shame they never caused, and absorb rage sown into them like foreign seeds. With each episode, the empath's shadow bag stretches wider, exposing the parts they have never faced. At a deeper level, however, this is not only one-sided abuse. It is also the activation of the unconscious. The presence of the narcissist ignites what the empath had buried: their suppressed anger, their fear of being unloved, their yearning for recognition. And so, painful as it is, their soul feels compelled to stay, as if hearing a silent summons. It is time to open the bag. It is time to face the shadow. The experience is like entering an ancient labyrinth. The narcissist walks in wearing the mask of power, the empath with the mask of gentleness, and both believe in each other's masks. But the labyrinth does not allow masks to last forever. Every manipulation, every wound, every unexpected twist cracks the outer shell. For the narcissist, the mask breaks because borrowed energy cannot sustain it forever. For the empath, the mask breaks because they can no longer hide their real feelings when pushed to the edge. In this labyrinth, the truth begins to surface, and both are forced to confront what they sought to hide. At first glance, it seems a tragedy. But under Jung's light, tragedy becomes opportunity. For here begins the stage of Nigredo, the blackening in alchemy, when the empath's old identity, built upon being good, kind, forgiving, starts to dissolve. This collapse is excruciating, yet it is the very condition required for the birth of a new being. Without this dissolution, there is no rebirth. Without Nigredo, there is no albedo, whitening, or rubedo, reddening. Jung once said, "There is no enlightenment without first going through darkness." Thus, the relationship with the narcissist, rather than being only a nightmare, can be seen as a right that forces the empath into the shadow, not to perish, but to discover another kind of life, another kind of self, deeper and truer. In shamanic myth, the apprentice must undergo symbolic death, being torn apart, cast into the abyss before they can become the healer. So too with the empath. Through this harrowing relationship, they are ushered into a spiritual initiation where the death of the old ego becomes the threshold of irreversible rebirth. The archetypal encounter with the narcissist, therefore, is not accident nor cruel twist of fate. It is a crucial chapter in the individuation journey the empath's soul must traverse. For only when the persona shatters, only when the shadow is brought to light, can they begin the true journey, the journey of becoming whole. Part 3. Nigredo. When the old ego dissolves and the empath enters the dark night of the soul, when the archetypal encounter between the empath and the narcissist reaches its deepest point, an inevitable event occurs. The entire ego structure the empath once trusted begins to collapse. This is no longer the stage of misunderstanding or ordinary manipulation. It is a dissolution at the root, where the light of reason can no longer penetrate and everything seems submerged in a dense darkness. Jung called this Nigredo, the first phase in the soul's alchemical journey, the blackening, the disintegration, the return to chaos. For the empath, it feels like a symbolic death, the death of old beliefs, of the gentle mask, of the ego built from the need to be loved and accepted. This dissolution unfolds silently yet fiercely. At first, the empath tries to cling to the familiar. They try to make the narcissist understand, to repair, to return to the good old days. But each attempt only deepens the fracture. Every sentence from the narcissist slices at the roots of belief. You're imagining things. I never did that. If you loved me, you wouldn't ask those questions. These words do more than deny reality. They erode the mind's ability to distinguish what is real from what is false. The empath begins to doubt their memory, their intuition, even the very soul within them. At a deeper level, the greatest pain is not the loss of a relationship, but the loss of self-location. The empath long believed they were the good one, the person who loves unconditionally. But when they are repeatedly accused, gaslit, and their true feelings dismissed, they realize that persona can no longer save them. The mask of kindness, once the key to surviving childhood, has become a burden. And as that mask cracks, a vast emptiness opens. They no longer know who they are, what is true, what is illusion. This is the dark night of the soul, where everything dissolves and only emptiness and chaos remain. And yet the paradox is this: it is precisely this chaos that becomes the doorway to real transformation. In alchemy, Nigredo is not meaningless destruction, but the necessary process by which pure gold can be refined. Every raw material, before becoming a precious metal, must be melted down, broken apart, returned to an amorphous state. Likewise, before the human soul can reach wholeness, it must pass through a dissolution of the old ego. For the empath, Nigredo forces them to face both, the narcissist's darkness being poured onto them, and their own darkness, the parts repressed since childhood now rising all at once. Buried anger starts to blaze. The fear of abandonment ever present, yet unnamed tears through the surface. The longing to be seen and recognized, long stuffed into the invisible bag, bursts open. The empath may feel as if they are going insane, as if a stranger is awakening inside their own body. In truth, this is not madness, it is liberation. What emerges in Nigredo are the parts of themselves they once refused to acknowledge. This night holds not only the narcissist shadow, but the empath's own. This is the most dangerous, yet most crucial stage. If the empath does not understand the nature of Nigredo, they can be swallowed by the dark, falling into despair, depression, even self-destruction. But if they have the courage to let go, to accept this dissolution as necessary, Nigredo becomes an initiation into rebirth. When the old ego is burned to the roots, the soul gains the chance to restructure itself on the foundation of truth. When illusions fall away, what remains is not a void, but the seed of a new being. In shamanic lore, the apprentice undergoes a rite of dismemberment, torn into pieces, dying a symbolic death only to be reborn with a new body and soul. As the empath passes through Nigredo, they experience a similar initiation. They feel shattered, no longer whole, but this very brokenness offers the chance to reassemble themselves differently, truer, deeper, more complete. Jung said, "You cannot become whole without confronting your own darkness." Nigredo is where that darkness is exposed to the very end. The empath no longer reads about the shadow in books or hears others explain it. They have lived in it, trembled within it, been covered by it. And when they dare to breathe with it, endure it without running, the darkness begins to transmute. It ceases to be a devouring abyss and becomes a furnace. Once the empath passes through Nigredo, their inner light changes in quality. Once that light was naive gentleness, easily exploited. Now it has been tempered, a light with weight and edge. They are no longer easily deceived by sweet words or dazzled by glittering masks. They recognize the scent of deceit, the taste of counterfeit love, the breath of manipulation. Having tasted these things, they become immune. Nigredo is not an ending, but a turning point. The death of the old ego that opens the door to the true self. After the dark night of the soul, the empath is no longer who they were. They step into the role of the wounded healer, one who knows pain and also knows light. Because they carry both, they become living proof that darkness is not an enemy, but the path to strength and wholeness. Part 4. Rebirth. When the empath emerges from Nigredo as a wounded healer, when the darkness of Nigredo has dissolved the old ego, and all illusions have burned away, a silence appears. In that silence, the empath feels like ashes after a wildfire, empty, exhausted, with nothing to cling to. Yet precisely in those ashes, a new sprout begins to stir. This is the stage of rebirth, where light is no longer the innocence of the beginning, but a light tempered by fire. At this moment, the empath realizes an important truth. They have died, but only the false part has died. The persona, the mask, the ego sustained by fear and the hunger for acceptance. That death opens space for a new self, deeper and more integral, born not from fantasy but from experience. If once the empath believed that love equals sacrifice, that kindness has no limits, that their worth comes from pleasing others, now they see those beliefs were chains. And once burned away in Nigredo, those chains leave an open space filled with freedom. Rebirth does not arrive overnight. It comes gradually, through small but steady changes. The empath learns to say no without guilt. They set boundaries not as a fearful barricade, but as a declaration of self-worth. They love not to be validated, but because true love flows from a whole heart. Each small act is like a seedling pushing up through ash, signaling life's return. In this process, the empath becomes a wounded healer. This is the image Jung emphasized. Only one who has journeyed through their own wound can truly touch the wounds of others. Previously, the empath's compassion had a naive hue. They rushed to save others as if that proved their worth. After traversing the dark, their empathy has a new texture. Compassionate, yet discerning. Gentle, yet incisive. They no longer get swept into endless cycles of self-sacrifice because they know the cost. Rebirth also gives the empath new eyes for the world. Darkness is no longer the enemy, but an essential part of life. Having lived in the dark, they no longer fear it. Having tasted deception, they know the unique flavor of truth. Having been manipulated, they detect subtle signs they once overlooked. Having endured destruction, they understand the meaning of life more deeply. This experience grants a kind of wisdom no book can teach. In alchemical imagery, this is albedo and rubedo, whitening and reddening. If Nigredo is decay, albedo is purification, where the soul is washed of illusion and fear. Rubedo is the moment. Gold appears the union of light and shadow, wound and healing, the personal and the collective soul. Having completed this process, the empath becomes living gold, a symbol of forged wholeness. Rebirth also means stepping beyond the identity of survivor. This is a subtle trap where many stop. They carry a proud credo: I was wounded, but I survived. While empowering for a time, it remains another persona, a mask built from the wound. The empath who has passed through Nigredo no longer defines themselves by injury. The wound remains as evidence, imprint, sacred mark, but not identity. They become a whole human, both light and dark, strong and vulnerable, loving and boundary-keeping. This wholeness grants a new freedom, the freedom to love without disappearing, to give without self-destruction, to say no without guilt. This is not a superficial freedom, but a freedom that has passed through fire, carved by the experience of darkness. The reborn empath carries a different light. If before their presence made others feel safe because they always yielded, now their presence both comforts and challenges. It comforts because they listen without judgment. It challenges because they reflect the masks others still wear. They become an honest mirror, not by effort, but because their very presence has been refined through Nigredo. Across many traditions, this is symbolized by the phoenix, the bird that burns and rises from ash. The empath is the phoenix of the inner life. What burns away is not their soul, but the illusions and invisible chains. From the ashes, they spread new wings, stronger, brighter, not because they fled the dark, but because they embraced it and transformed it into strength. At this point, the empath's journey reaches a collective threshold. Rebirth is not for them alone. When one person emerges from Nigredo, they carry knowledge the community needs. They know that in every group, darkness is present. Unspoken rules, unconscious projections, social masks. Having traversed their own dark, the empath can become a keeper of the circle, a presence that reminds us true connection arises only when light and shadow are acknowledged together. Thus, this rebirth is not merely personal, it is an invitation to us all. The empath who has gone to hell and returned stands as living proof that darkness is not the final period. It is a door. It is a furnace. It is where the old ego dies, so that a new self, truer, more whole, more free, can be born. For this reason, the empath is not only a survivor or a once wounded heart, but a wounded healer, the emblem of a love tempered by fire, a light that has passed through flames, a wholeness powerful enough to inspire an entire community. Part 5. New Temptations After Rebirth. 3 subtle traps for the empath. After passing through Nigredo and stepping into rebirth, empaths often believe they have reached ultimate freedom. They have risen from the ashes, found a new light, learned to set boundaries, and felt the strength that comes from wholeness. But the spiritual path is never linear, and Jung reminds us that each time we draw closer to clarity, the shadow reappears in subtler forms. This is when the empath must face 3 new traps, 3 temptations that can pull them back down if they are not awake enough to recognize them. The first trap is hardening the heart. After all the wounds they have endured, the empath's natural reaction is to forge a steel armor around the soul. They tell themselves, "I will never let anyone hurt me again. I will never love again." That vow sounds powerful, but in truth it is a prison. A heart locked to avoid pain also locks away joy, connection, and true love. This is a kind of petrification. No one can hurt the empath anymore, but they are no longer truly alive. If they stop here, the rebirth from Nigredo is only half formed. The phoenix does not take flight. It turns into a cold, lifeless stone. The second trap is defining oneself by the wound. Many who escape a narcissist adopt a new identity. I am someone who was hurt but survived. That identity brings pride and even community and empathy. But if they cling to it, they unwittingly make the wound the center of their life. They view the world through the lens of victim and survivor, turning every experience into a chance to prove they are strong and have overcome. In essence, this is another mask, a persona forged from suffering. And like any mask, it limits the truth of one's being. Empaths who fall into this trap may be proud of their resilience, yet deep down they are still governed by the dark, because their identity remains fastened to the past. The third trap is far subtler, becoming a narcissist unconsciously. Jung warned that what we reject will rule us from the dark. If empaths are not awake enough to keep working with their own shadow, they risk reenacting precisely what once harmed them. They may seek validation through overgiving, manipulate through kindness, or even taste a sense of power by becoming the savior of others. In those moments, they are no different from the narcissist, only the mask has changed. The empath's shadow is not blatant deceit, but refined manipulation through love. This is the most dangerous trap, because it wears the robe of compassion while hiding a need to control and to prove one's worth. Recognizing these 3 traps requires a different kind of courage. The courage to admit that a closed heart is a form of fear, not strength. The courage to release the survivor identity so the wound becomes only one part of a larger tapestry, not the whole story. And the courage to face the possibility that within oneself there still lies a latent shard of the narcissist, a part that seeks control, that wants to save others in order to feel important. The only way past these traps is not denial, but integration. Jung called this the deeper step of individuation, daring to acknowledge that within us resides both light and shadow, the capacity to love and the risk to manipulate, the power to heal and the wounds not yet healed. When the empath can admit this, they no longer need any mask, no need to be the victim, the hero, or the savior. They only need to be themselves, a whole human being. And within that wholeness, a new kind of freedom appears. Not the freedom of the closed-off person, nor the freedom of the one forever proving themselves, but true freedom, the freedom to open the heart without fear of being swallowed, to love without losing oneself, to say no without guilt. This is the freedom born of looking directly at all three traps and stepping beyond them. If Nigredo is symbolic death, then moving beyond these three temptations is symbolic maturation. At that point, the empath not only survives and is reborn, they grow up, maturing in love, understanding that true love never demands self-destruction. Maturing in freedom, knowing that boundaries are not walls of separation, but milestones of self-respect. Maturing in wisdom, realizing that darkness does not need to be annihilated, but integrated. In this moment, the empath steps beyond a merely personal role to become a living archetype, a mirror for the community. Their presence is both gentle and incisive, compassionate and uncompromising. Anyone who encounters them feels two things at once: comfort, because someone truly understands pain, and challenge, because that presence reflects the masks others still wear. This is the balance that only those who have passed through Nigredo, been reborn, and transcended the three subtle temptations can achieve.